you it is. You know that this meeting is recorded. Hey, Sergio. How you doing?
Hello, hello, hello.
I'm alive. Welcome, everyone. Back from holidays, most of, or for some, I guess. But yeah, welcome back, everyone. Another meeting. Anyone want to say hi? Or introduce themselves?
Hi.
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 Hello.
Hi.
All right, great introductions. Okay, I guess we dive right into it. Unless does anyone have anything they want to start off with or want to discuss?
You mean related to the Spec version 3?
Or something else that's kind of related. It's up to you.
Okay. So then I'm gonna save some money and I'm not gonna go to therapy anymore. I'm gonna use this as
I cannot promise you that will help you in any positive
I don't care.
way.
As long as you listen carefully, I don't care.
That we can do. That we can do. All right, jumping into it, I guess. So I'm just gonna share my screen real quick. So for those of you that haven't seen the last meeting, I rambled for myself for about an hour or 50 minutes about references. And by then, or after that meeting, I put together this proposal. So in short, from my perspective, I think we have a problem with using the JSON reference standard. And the reason is that nowhere within that standard is there anything defined how to handle non-JSON references. And a few other things, but that's a primary issue I have with it. And this means that when we look at something like Magic's proposal for extending the schema object to allow custom formats, we get a bit of an issue if you want to reference, for example, a protobuf file. Because if you follow the JSON reference standard, at least in my opinion, there's nothing that defines how you should handle that. How does it work with JSON pointers, for example, with fragments? Can it look into a protobuf file? I know that Fran did a bit of research into this in like 2 years ago. But there's no standard defining exactly how it should work, which makes it, in my opinion, hard to develop tooling around it. But
it's actually worse. Sorry to interrupt. It's actually worse that the JSON pointer is meant for JSON structures only, right? So it's not that there's no way or it's undefined or anything. It's that it's explicitly defined that it's only for JSON. So if you want to use it for protobuf, cool, you can come up with some hack, but yeah, it's a hack. It's not an intended usage. So, and this is a spec, so we shouldn't be using hacks in the spec, right? So if we ever want to become a standard,
yeah, I agree.
If we want to become something weird, yeah, of course. Thing is that, but with Avro, I don't think there's any issue because Avro is JSON. So yeah, so Avro is okay. It's just another. You need to point to the right place, of course. That's the only thing.
I guess whatever cannot be converted to JSON or something like this, because for example, RAML you can convert to JSON, right? YAMLs.
Yeah. So what we do is some kind of like a trick, like YAMLs will also not be used, but since we specify in the spec that we only allow the subset of YAML that is compatible with JSON, then we allow people to use $refs there, JSON pointers there, because yeah, I mean, it's just a YAML is just a presentation mode, and the source will be for the tool. The source is going to be a JSON object. So in the end, yeah, YAML is just presentation. So it's a presentation layer on top. So yeah, so it's possible, but in theory, it's also should not also be allowed with YAML. In theory,
yeah.
Yeah.
So I have the exact same thoughts that you have. Luckily, we have opposing thoughts as well. So I kind of hope that that Jeremy would be here, but it is what it is. But he's opposing, or his argument, as I understand it, is that that the JSON reference standard, that you shouldn't read the JSON part as being specific for JSON part, like, or JSON specific, but you should take a step back and say, okay, you have this object, you have an array, you have whatever, these abstract structures, and that is what you can reference with the standard. That's how I understand his point of view. And an important note here is that, as I understand it as well, he have discussed this with the authors of the standard and went into length discussing this exact thing. So I think it's a case of how like how specific do we want the standard to be, and how much can be abstracted in some sense, and say, okay, so take a step back and say, even this is very specific within the standard, you have to take a step back and we can explain it from the reference standpoint. The same way that we are kind of, what's it called? The way that we have our reference object currently defined, where we still, like, we say that it's defined with JSON reference, but we also define some extra bits here, also in terms of YAML. Like, we can do that, and that is the one approach, and still use JSON reference as the core of references. And I guess the opposing feature is what I'm proposing, developing the new standard for referencing. Yes. And exactly as Fran goes into details, like if you look at the standard, there's nothing within the standard that defines or abstracts away from JSON. It is very, very JSON specific, which
it's actually called JSON pointer.
And JSON pointer, yeah.
Right. It has it on the name, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So that he is opposing to, or not opposing, but like we should be, and it's a great point, we should be very, what's it called, like, not be afraid, but we shouldn't lightly create new standards just because we can, just in case any of you have seen it. I'm just gonna show it, like, and then there was 15 standards. Like, if we can, we should avoid it at if all possible. But I haven't, the way that I personally understand it, the standard, it's not possible to do what we want to do without changing it or proposing something new.
What if the new standard is exactly what JSON pointer is, but without explicit definition saying that it's only for JSON, and then we increase, like the definition to to any kind of data structure, right? In that case, I don't think it's bad to have a new standard or a new spec, right? If you want,
yeah.
Because people will have to do nothing. Like software meant to be working for JSON pointers will work with these new pointers.
Exactly.
And the only thing is the other way around will not, of course. But I mean, I know we have to, at all costs, always try to not reinvent the wheel. But the thing is that we have a very specific problem here that nobody thought about before, I think, because the past was either XML or JSON. So, and we had XML pointers and we had JSON pointers. So but now we don't have XML and JSON. We have XML, JSON, we have protobuf, we have GraphQL structures, or types, or TypeScript types, or even any programming language type system. So
basically,
thing is that how far do we want to go?
Yeah, and it's actually the approach I took as well, that I basically copied everything from JSON reference and then added specifics for non-JSON structures. That's it. So everything in the proposal is still the same in terms of if you reference something in JSON, everything works exactly as JSON reference. But if you start linking to other non-JSON files, then there's very specifics about what to do with that. And I basically just took the easy approach and say, you can reference non-JSON values, and then you should place that into, I just created this content thing. So everything is just loaded into a string, and that's it in tooling. That's the most basic approach, basically. And then you can further process it in your implementations as you see fit. Convert it to JSON, do something else with it. Up to you, right? So I tried to take the very, very minimal approach and still reuse almost everything. Yes, so
can you share this thing that you're looking at?
Yes. See if I can do it here. Where is my there? Yeah. So this is the proposal for now. There's still some things that we have to resolve. Okay, maybe I should take a step back. Okay, so I had some requirements for the new standard, things that it should support or should define. So it should always produce a valid JSON document. This means that whatever resolvement techniques we use, it should always produce a valid JSON document in the end.
Even if it's not a JSON data structure?
Yes. And the reason I did that is because async API is in JSON. Or YAML for that sake.
Oh.
And it was a concern from who was it? It was it was a concern from Jesse. I think I can't remember exactly where it was stated, but it was something that, and I get it because like if we still want to use the async API format, we still have to comply with JSON, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that was one of the requirements.
But a string, for instance, it's still valid JSON.
Yes.
A simple string. So if it cannot be serialized to JSON for whatever reason, it's just a string with the whole content, and that's it.
Yeah, exactly. That's what the standard is proposing. It should define what to do when you reference non-JSON data in JSON, because, well, that's the entire standard, basically. It should still define the behavior for referencing JSON data, basically the JSON reference standard all over. Then I added another one, which is complex in some sense. So let's say that I, in async API, reference a JSON schema document. JSON schema document has ref as well. This means that the standard should define the behavior that should be followed when there is multiple references keyword with different resolvement behavior. So what I mean by this is that whatever is being referenced from an async API standpoint, it should follow that specific document's or standards behavior and not async API. So it kind of just cuts right through and just say, whenever you reference something, it's no longer this new standard that's being followed for referencing. It's using that specific that's being referenced, basically.
You mean that, for instance, inside a schema object, that is a JSON schema object, if we find a $ref, it should follow the JSON schema $ref mechanism and not our new shiny new $ref mechanism or whatever. Right? That makes sense. Yeah.
Yes. And this includes for any other standards that also defines reference. For example, if we reference an OpenAPI schema document, the same happens there, where they use their own standard for the referencing, and it should follow that.
How many referencing standards or techniques did you find so far?
Oh, do we want to get into that?
Just curious.
Now that's primary one. Okay, so let me rephrase that. The problem is that the standard that everyone is using is this URI reference format, which is this RFC3 something, how you define the reference itself. The problem is that standard defines something that's called application domain, which means that this is in terms of relative references. So if you have a relative reference, the application, which in this case would be JSON schema or OpenAPI, they can define something called the base URI that should be resolved from. So all relative references should use that base URI and then add the relative reference to that to get to the fully qualified URI for the resource. And that is the primary problem with these references, because none of the tooling respect those application-specific requirements. If that makes sense.
Beautiful.
No, but OpenAPI 3.1 defines its own. It doesn't even reference JSON reference anywhere within the spec, as I can see. It only references URI format standard. And JSON reference, the same thing. And they even have custom bundling behavior in terms of, okay, so in your implementations, if you see a reference, you need to check under definitions, or in our case, it would be components if you wanted similar logic. So this means that there's very specific things for each standard, how it should behave. And it's a problem when we want to use their formats, which is where all of this kind of falls into place. Or yeah,
it's challenging, right? Because
yes,
if you isolate the definition, you don't have the context of the API document or anything. You don't know if this is coming from one place or another. So you don't know, by isolating the definition, you don't know if it should follow one way of resolving the references or another, because everyone is using $ref. So the $ref name, right? So and everybody is using the same format for the $ref value. It's just the way it's resolved that changes. So there's nothing there telling you it will be resolved in one way or another. You should use context all the time.
Yes.
And I'm afraid that you might not always have the context.
That is true. The way I currently solve this problem is by defining the exact same thing in terms of application space. So this means that the standard defines that you, as a user of the standard, has to define something like a reference format. That's taken a step back, basically, that defines this metadata of the reference. Basically, it's Magic's proposal, but it's abstracted away from async API, if that makes sense. Was that a no, Brad? I think that was a no.
No. I'm thinking that, yeah, like reference format, schema format. It sounds to me that we're, I don't know, too many formats, right? Too many. I mean, we can always change the name. I don't know, but aren't we customizing too much? Maybe. Like we're making every piece of the puzzle to be movable and potentially change. So
it's true that it does define, like it does create this complex customary thing. It's basically the $ID all over.
Yeah.
Or right, and that's a bit of a problem when tooling doesn't comply with the standard. It's only a problem because tooling doesn't fully support it, or it's used like in various ways.
Mm-hmm. And
it is a problem. So it's not something that really goes away, even though that the idea is to not give tooling, but create the tooling around the standard. So even if we create tooling around the standard, there's still going to be tools outside of that toolbox that are going to have a problem, right?
Yeah. Well, that's their problem. Like they should be updating, of course. Like we can do nothing about it. Just maybe just notice them and tell them that, I don't know, they have a problem there and creating an issue or something like that. And if they want to solve it, that's fine. If not, it's their decision, of course.
I am working on, it's something that I haven't, it's not done, basically. But the proposal is that I think we can join forces in solving this reference issue because it's all related. It's a problem in OpenAPI, it's a problem in JSON schema, and we have a little bit of different use cases in terms of what we expect from the library that resolves these references. There's a little bit difference between deviation, but I still think that we can create tooling that can serve, let's just say, all three standards, for example, and gather the community around those tools. And I'm not saying we should create the tools, but we can also adapt current tools that has this reference and want to solve it. But I'm putting the proposal together to highlight, okay, here's all the standard that uses references, here's all the differences between them and how it should work, here's the requirements for the tools we're looking for, and here's basically the API of the library we're looking for. This library should be able to do this, for example. So
I like this much better, to be honest, than that we invent our own format or something.
like instead, or what?
Instead, yeah, so that we can invent our own, a custom format, but all of us together, like OpenAPI, JSON schema, and us aligning on the concept of the referencing mechanism. Right.
But I don't think it necessarily has to align in terms of reference behavior, because it's.
Then I'm not understanding that.
So the proposal that I'm still writing is taking a step back and say, we have a JSON document, we have references or linking to something else that follows some kind of standard. We need a tool that probably handle all of these. I'm just going to reference 3 standards here: OpenAPI, Async API, and JSON schema, and can accurately, based on whatever the standard follows for like how they define references, can accurately resolve the values. That's basically it. So Async API can define their own behavior, because I don't think that this is not a use case for OpenAPI, for example. It's not a use case for JSON schema, but we all want to reference to something.
Yeah,
that follows.
You mean that we should agree on referencing, on building tools that respect each of the referencing mechanisms?
Yes.
Together?
Yes.
With the community, with all these 3 communities, or even more communities?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
It's basically the same thought process that I have for Modelina, right? It's not specific for Async API. It's a toolbox that can be used across specs.
Okay. What do you think it's going to be the interest from the OpenAPI community and from the JSON schema community, for instance? Where, like, why will they want to have this? Isn't it the problem that we're suffering ourselves only?
It's a problem. It's a problem that I haven't fully looked into the entire tooling box for each standard yet, because there's quite a few tools that tries to solve it, but there's no tool that how can I frame it? It's a problem across specs, but each spec can individually solve it themselves, right? For their specific use case.
Yeah, the problem is that if you targeting tooling here, the problem that I see is that OpenAPI and JSON schema, none of them are maintaining tools. So, so there's no way to tell, hey, OpenAPI, let's join forces, because they don't care about the tools. So we should be going one by one each of the tools, and hey, do you want to join this effort? Which I don't know if it's one. I don't know if it's gonna work. Like if it's gonna be, it might work, but the thing is that I don't know if it's gonna be worth. Because it's a lot of moving parts. It's not just 3 standards. It's just probably, I don't know, 30, 40 different people and projects.
Yeah.
So most of them are developed in their spare time.
Yeah.
So,
and my thought
are not even maintained. So.
Oh yeah, that's true.
So yeah.
And sorry, go.
No, I was thinking that I don't know that, and that's on one hand. And on the other hand, so here we can hear you.
I know. I wanted to say something.
Okay. Let me just finish. And on one hand is this, and and on the other hand is that I don't know if it's something that they're worried about, to be honest. Like, we were worried about it. but I don't see the JSON or Schema or Open API community worried about it. Open API itself, for instance, is not worried about tools. They don't care.
Yeah,
and JSON Schema as well. And they might be worried that the tools are not following, are not complying. But and then my concern here is that they may be difficult to convince to join the effort because they win nothing. It's not, or almost nothing. So yeah, I don't, in any case, it's worth trying. Let's see what happens. But they may join. Who knows?
Well, yeah, I agree what Fran is saying. I wanted to say something. So, would it be possible to declare a standard? I wrote in the chat in Zoom something. I'm going to clarify that. So I asked if you mean some kind of meta standard and sub standards, like one for async API, another for Open API, or rather, because you were discussing about tooling. But what if we do it in that way where we define a schema that is compatible completely? I think you mentioned earlier that is compatible completely with this URI format, and we introduce features, only features, so no breaking changes, so people can join the standard without doing nothing, right? So I think you mentioned that earlier, or some related solution. So in that way, I mean, I completely agree that if we go with the tooling side, I think we are going to be alone there, to be honest. And I'm not blaming. It's just because we have the need now, or we have to create the need. If we want to convert this to a standard, we have to create that need. And I'm not sure if tooling is the right way. Because again, tooling would be, I don't know, JavaScript tool, but then you will have to create tooling for other languages, blah, blah, or frameworks or whatever, you know.
I get it. Yeah.
Now the problem is not that we have to create tools. We will have to create tools. If we create a new standard, our tools will have to support this new standard, obviously. And if we create a Java parser or a Go parser, we will have to implement this new standard.
Regardless of whether we use this new standard, we need to create our own tools.
Exactly. The problem is not our own tools. Problem is convincing the rest of the tools, you know, to respect each format, resolution, you know, reference resolution format, or mechanism. Sorry. So yeah. So that's the thing. Yeah.
I see something like. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Okay. So we are doing something in whenever we declare how our schema object work, we say something, we extend from JSON schema, right? But we add some extra things. So with this example, I think just to clarify, and to people that it's listening to us or will listen, I guess we want to achieve something like this, right? So, okay, this is a new standard that is based on, or it supports this other one, but on top of it, we have this, and the other feature. Again, so coming back to what I said, so if we start with a standard that it's not adding anything on top of it, or rather everything that it's added, it's kind of optional, like pluggable, or I don't know how to call it, then it would be supported by automatically, right? Like,
yeah, the new format will be a superset of the existing one.
Sorry, my microphone got disconnected. I don't know why.
Sorry.
Yeah, you said right.
I think it's important to remember that even though that we intend or propose to create tools for more than our own standard, is because the tooling has to be engineered to support it from the start. The architecture of the tool has to have this, or the requirements of the tool has to have this in while it's being developed and architectured. Otherwise, it's not set up to support it. So this means that when we create our own tool, because we have to, or adapt another tool that does some of it, but still doesn't support multiple specs or follow multiple standards, it's important to note that from async API standpoint, we still need to parse JSON schema documents, draft 7, draft 4, whatever standard it is. And we still have to follow their exact standard for resolving references. And that is, I'm not particularly trying to rally the entire community, like both OpenAPI, JSON schema, around one specific tool. But it is a tool that supports all of the standards. So, and it also makes it easier for platform providers that has all of these different standards to integrate with this new tool, because it supports a variety of it, because it's not specific for async API. And that's kind of my goal with proposing this. It's not so much because I know that neither OpenAPI or JSON schema want tools. So it's kind of hard to rally anyone behind the tool, right? But we still need to set it up to support all of our goals for async API. And while we do that, I can see it as being supportive for all of the other formats, even though that we maybe not focus on it from the beginning. Right? So it's more from taking a step back and try to look at the bigger picture and provide better tooling for the entire ecosystem, which should be the absolute goal.
Agreeing precisely because of that, I will say that I will not target this for version 3 of the spec. And I will target this as a separate issue, as a separate thing, separate initiative, right? And
do you mean the library part, or?
Huh?
Do you mean the library or the standard part?
The standard. So we stick to the existing one, even though it's kind of broken, but we stick to it. We don't change it. We continue using the same one. We continue resolving references the way we do it right now. Even if it's wrong in some cases, but we change nothing. We don't do anything there. And we move this in parallel and create something, probably even outside the async API initiative, I will say. If it can become its own standard, we can even propose it to IETF or something like that to become an RFC there. That's another, of course, that's another subject, but this can be something separate, and that will be like, it will be like this, you know, a new spec for referencing and any kind of object and a set of tools, a set of resolvers, right? In JavaScript, TypeScript, you know, Java, Go, whatever, in many languages. So it's like a separate, I see it like a separate initiative, to be honest. It's another effort completely. I mean, we can start it inside async API, but at some point I see it like it should probably have its own house.
Yeah.
And I see this as complex enough to not put it for the version 3 of the spec, because now that we're discussing this, I'm seeing, and you know, it's too much, and this is the kind of thing that you don't want to get wrong.
Yes,
but once you do it, you're in a problem.
Yeah, I think that's a good discussion to have next time then, because if if we, let's say we go with that decision because it's a valid decision, but it also means that 3.0 will not support XML, protobuf, or any other format.
3.0 now. Yeah. But there's nothing stopping us from supporting protobuf in version 4.
Yes.
And I mean, and not
basically in 3.1.
Sorry.
Because it's just
3.1 actually. Yeah. If we don't change the format, yeah, exactly. It's not a breaking change. Yeah. So I mean, it's discussable, but yeah, I don't think it's a breaking change. So yeah, 3.1, 3.2, where 3.1 for sure now. I think it's gonna happen probably after 2 or 3 months after we release version 3.
Yeah, that's
but yeah, 3.6 might have this behavior, something like that. And I think it's gonna take time for us to grab our hands around this problem and how to solve it properly, and come up with use cases and with different formats, protobuf, XSD, Avroids, Jason said that's not a problem. Flat buffer, EDI, COBOL, copybook, wherever. I don't know.
Whatever there is, right?
COBOL, yeah, COBOL is, I love it. So
I just took all of the formats that I saw as comments in all of the issues and just whatever.
Fortran structures. I think it was code structure in Fortran. So yeah, but even more. I don't know, like TypeScript types. I don't know, any other kind of format, GraphQL types, and so on. So yeah. And see if the new format adapts well to this new to this kind of documents, mixing all of them together and see how it works, if it works well or not. Just to basically to test it properly. What I have the feeling that this one can make version 3 be postponed by a lot, and that will be postponing the publish subscribe confusion, the channel reusability thing, the request reply features. Like I think there's enough value already if we don't fix it that we can ship and move forward. And so we decouple it from version 3, right? So we also don't feel the stress that damn, we have to ship it as soon as possible, and then we commit a mistake because we are under stress. So yeah.
But yeah, it's an important discussion to have also because Magic's not here, which is like he is the main driver for supporting this XSD and like different formats. So yeah, I think let's take it up next time.
We can still, we can still support these formats, just not referencing to specific fields of the objects. Like you can reference to a whole file, right? But you cannot use the JSON pointer. You know what I mean?
So you want to do a hack, basically?
Yes.
You could use some kind of prefixes, right? And based on those prefixes, you have one logic or another. Like,
but that means you need to change the standard again, because everything we do is this. The problem is this, and this is what we reference. This does not support any other structure as I read it in the JSON.
Does this draft specify that we have to use $ref?
Yes.
Then problem solved. Let's use something else, not $ref. $link.
But that means you need to create a standard.
Not a standard, just like $link. I'm just inventing it. And I think it already exists on JSON schema.
$ref2.
$ref2.
Copy one.
And it just supports a URL, right? Without the fragment part, just a fully qualified URL, but without the fragment part.
But then it's basically the standard.
Then it's basically like it's just a URL. And give me a URL where but I can load the whole file. But you cannot tell me get the file and then get into this field and then this field and then this field. No,
that way,
you just give me the whole file, give me the whole resource that you find on this URL, right? And that's it. And we don't support sneaking inside the resulting the pointed reference. And at least you can already point to Avro files and XSD files that will contain the whole structure that you want to have. Or
then it is very, very close to exactly what I'm proposing.
Yeah.
Like the thing that you're talking about there has almost no difference than what I'm proposing here.
I mean, the difference is that we're not using the ref, so then we're not hacking the existing
That's
standard, and only our tools will understand this field, right?
But it means that user, like, it would then require version 4.
Sorry, say again.
It would then require version 4 instead of version like a feature change if you want to standardize it with ref.
If we move back to $ref, yes, it will require version 4. But
oh wait, no, it doesn't. Does it?
It does, yeah.
Well, but we will have to remove ref, so that is a breaking
it's-
change.
Yeah, it's already a
getting
breaking change.
complicated.
And then getting back to $ref again will be another breaking change. So yeah, so no, not a good idea. But
All right, we're gonna definitely need to discuss this some more and figure out exactly what we can do to get to an answer.
my feeling is that this is complex enough to dedicate probably a whole version, a whole effort like the one we're doing with version 3, but only to this thing. This is huge. This one.
But then I disagree. Then I will disagree with you that we should support referencing or linking. Let's just say
no, exactly. Yeah, exactly. No, that's a bad idea. Like, then we just forget about other formats for now. We don't support any other formats yet.
Yeah.
In version 3. It is what it is. We have the bandwidth we have.
Yes, that's true.
But I have the feeling that this is going to block many other important features. And so another way of doing it is like we release version 3, which is just a number. And then in version 3 point something, we release support for multiple formats.
Yeah.
And that's it. It's still in version 3, but it's just not version 3.0, but it's still version 3.
Yeah, that makes sense. I am still gonna finish up the proposal for the tooling part because it's, yeah, I already started it, so I might as well add the discussion as well, or the issue. But other than that, I'm not pursuing this any further. Like, it's there for now, and leaving it there basically.
It's fine. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right. Well, that was that hour.
I have one last comment. Related to version 3. So today I was thinking about this new what's it called, channel, this new channels object on version 3. We have a field called address, and address is a physical, let's say, physical name of the topic or channel, right? And then I thought, like, how will parameters work on version 3 then? Like, right now we have parameters in the channel name, in the channel ID, right? These variables that you can put in the middle. If we have a field that's called address, how do we make it work?
Those won't be there. That's right.
I'm confused. Why does moving where the value is located have any influence on where parameters has an influence?
Because one of the differences is that, or maybe it was just in my head. I need to check. But one of the things that we did for version 2 is that the channel name is a URI template format. It's in a URI template format. So the address, or at least as I was imagining it, it was not an URI template anymore. It was just a plain string.
Oh, yeah, that's a problem.
So that, yeah. So maybe it was just in my head. Yeah, it can still be a URI template. But now I was thinking, one of the most confusing things on this KPI has been using the URI template format on channels. Like if we have a I don't know, like for instance, if we have a channel on RabbitMQ, for instance, that is like this, it's a topic like this, user dot signed up. Should we write user dot signed up, or should we write user / signed up? Because the dot is a separator in AMQP, and the separator in URI template is a slash. So because the first one will be indicating that we're kind of like escaping the dot in AMQP. So this dot will not be a separator in AMQP. I don't know if this is even possible, but that's what it should mean, I think. But I don't think we're not following this. We're just taking the value as it is, and that's it. But I see some people using slash because it's a separator, and some other people are not. And also, you can, in URI templates, you cannot do this, for instance. You cannot have this is not valid URI template, right? Because I mean, I have to check again, but if I recall correctly, this is not valid. It has to be in between slashes. So right. The variable name needs to be in between slashes. It cannot be in the middle of a string. And for URI template, the dot has no meaning. It's just another character. So
yeah, that's probably gonna be a bit of a lengthy discussion, because, for example, it's the same problem with nats, because initially I started using dots when I defined the channels, because, well, that was the separator that nats used.
Yeah.
But very quickly it became, okay, so now it needs to be a valid channel with, what's the standard? I can't remember it.
URI template.
URI template, yeah. But then the question becomes, when exactly is it slash? As like it shouldn't be converted to dot, because from the nats point of view, I was like, okay, so I just replace all of the slashes with dots, and like in the code generation, and then the channels or the topics would be compliant with nats.
Yes, that's.
But then how can you define if a channel contains a slash?
You have to escape the slash.
Okay. Yeah.
On the URI template.
But it would also
escape slashes on the URI templates format.
Okay. But it would imply that the user know that tooling changes this.
Yeah, it is highly confusing. It is not obvious at first.
And documentation, for that matter, because we are still rendering the slash when in theory it's dot, right?
Yes. Yeah. And it should be.
In fact.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So no, I was saying that in fact in the documentation we say that they are explicitly paths and are relatives to the server. So it's like there is no other way to declare right now. Sorry, that's my daughter. There's no way to declare actually, for example, a RabbitMQ topic, like you say, the user.signal.
What do you mean?
With the parameter. Sorry.
I mean, if you use slashes, yes.
Oh yeah. Of course.
But then on code generation or documentation generation, you will have to replace it.
I actually didn't know this. That also relative reference channel paths
this is
are
what I
relative
was saying,
to
actually.
that
They are relative to the server, so it doesn't make sense.
Oof.
You're saying that we are rendering.
This is misleading because by I think this is coming from OpenAPI probably.
Yeah,
but this is this is misleading because relative here might mean there is a relative URL, right? Or it's relative meaning that it's a channel that exists in this server, right?
That's true.
But yeah, this is misleading. So because we're talking about paths that look like URLs, but they're not URLs. So paths are channels are not URLs.
It depends on the protocol.
Yeah, it depends on the protocol, of course. But by definition, they're not URLs, even though they follow the URI template. Because I thought it was a good idea that we follow an existing one, an existing standard. But yeah, it's creating more problems than solutions. So yeah, my other idea, I have to work on the new channels object, so I'll propose solutions for that. But my other idea is that we explore regular expressions.
That sounds complex already.
Yes.
Yeah. And you have to stick to a standard because regular expressions are not always the same, right?
It's not always the same, but we stick to whatever we want, like ECMA 262, something like that.
We create our own standard as well.
Or we can create our own. Why not?
Async regex.
So yeah, I'll come up with a solution. Just wanted to highlight that this problem exists, and that like leaving it as a URI template might be an option, but I thought that it would be a cool chance now that we're moving things around to get rid of this URI template format. Yeah,
or at least solve this problem that there is within it, right? Because that's the main objective.
So we fix this problem forever, like with the publish and subscribe confusion as well. And that's it. It's not a problem to anyone because in the end, it's not a problem to anyone because we're not respecting the specking any tool. So we're just throwing the channel name there with slashes or whatever you put there, and we allow people to use like variable names in the middle of a string, not only in between slashes. So yeah, we're not validating that it's compliant with URI template. Basically, we're not validating this. So yeah, that's why it's working, because tools are not really respecting it. So yeah.
Or they're just doing whatever they want.
Exactly.
Basically.
And then it's fine. Like the last example that I wrote there, user dot and then something and then dot signed up. It's not. I think it's not a valid URI template if I recall correctly. But
I think you're right,
or maybe it's valid, but it doesn't mean what we think it means. But if it's not going to fail anyway because we're not validating it. So yeah, interesting stuff.
Next time I need to get an overview of like where we are with all of the features because I have no idea at the moment. Also in terms of the parser and what has been like what is ready, like the changes that you're doing around the pops up confusion, etc. I have a tiny bit idea about the state you're in, but I would love to get an update there if possible, or if I can find out what's happening. But yeah, let's do that next time. I think that would make sense. Everyone is probably back from holiday at that point. So get a good overview of what's missing, what needs to be done, and what's left. Or that's the same thing, but yeah, you know what I mean. Any last remarks before finishing?
I'm just testing a URI template online editor, and it seems to work with my last example. So maybe I'm wrong, and it's allowed. So yeah.
That would make everything much more easy, huh?
Yeah, much easier. Yes. If that's the case, yes.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining. And I'll see you next time.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.